Hello everyone, and this is Diacron M. Today I'm going to be starting the first video of what will hopefully be a series of lore videos regarding Crash Fever. I still don't have an editor at the moment, so I do apologize if the video is not that visually intensive. So this first video will be mainly discussing an introduction to the lore of Crash Fever by explaining a bit about the setting of the game. I won't be going too deep into some of the details since that's better saved for videos talking about more specific story arcs. And a lot of this information is gathered from the series of lore blurs that the Japanese developers released prior to the 3rd anniversary of Crash Fever, and be supplemented by various details and corrections that are made in the following story arcs and events. A quick note before I begin. Due to the nature of Crash Fever, most of the names I see I only see them written and never really spoken. I'm trying to do research on names to try and get the pronunciations correct, but I might make some mistakes here and there. Chinese and Korean in particular can be a bit difficult for me to pronounce, so for example, if we take the name this, it looks to me like Kinzang, but I think it's actually pronounced closer to Xinjiang. So I apologize in advance for any errors in pronunciation. And lastly, while I may be the most knowledgeable about the lore of Crash Fever, I do make mistakes from time to time, so feel free to point out any errors you notice in the comments below. So, what exactly is the setting of Crash Fever? It exists in a digital world known as ALICE. ALICE is an acronym, and this acronym stands for All Mankind's Live and Interactive Communication Entertainment. Admittedly, the acronym is a bit of rough English, but that's beside the point. ALICE originally started as just an entertainment service, kind of like an advanced virtual reality program. Its purpose was to transplant all 5 human senses into a virtual setting and have all the entertainment of the time pushed to the limit. In other words, its goal was complete virtual immersion. However, during its development, some of the designers believed that, rather than remaining as just an entertainment service, it should be the next step in human evolution. So ALICE became a very complex digital world that modeled the real world while allowing for things a bit beyond the normal physical limitations. In a way, it's kind of similar to the Matrix, where people exist in the real world but have their consciousness present in the digital world that has many properties of the real world while allowing much more. So, something to clarify about characters in Crash Fever really quick as it relates to the world, since I've seen many players be confused about this. So while many characters in the world of ALICE share the same names as countless real-world figures or mythological characters, they should not be considered as the same people as their namesakes. For example, let's take the legendary figure of academia, Einstein. Is she supposed to be a gender-bent version of Albert Einstein, or a female avatar of the well-known scientist? Neither would happen to be true. Einstein, the Crash Fever character, is just a woman that was a scientist inspired by the works of Albert Einstein and decided to choose to name her avatar in the world of ALICE after him. In a similar vein, let's take a look at the character Zeus. Is Zeus supposed to be the powerful god of thunder that rules over Mount Olympus from Greek mythology? Nope, Zeus is just an important administrative AI named after the Greek deity due to his importance in managing Fatal Paradox, the environmental management facility of ALICE. So, going back to talking about the creation of ALICE, it begins with a group of elite scientists and researchers in various fields known as academia. The basis for Project ALICE, as it was known back then, was the Liddell algorithm, which was originally coded by Turing. We don't know too much about what the Liddell algorithm actually does, but we do know that whatever it is the foundation for ALICE. So not too long after ALICE began to become integrated with various social networking and entertainment services, the large debate over what it should be and its purpose occurred. While this is sometimes referred to as a civil war, it wasn't really a violent conflict per se, and just a series of heated debates. The reformists under Mobius eventually prevailed over the hedonists, and ALICE was adjusted towards their vision. Part of these adjustments included establishing ALICE's core management organization that would be able to confer with government organizations while still remaining anonymous. This group would be led by the Permanent Decision Council, known as the Superior Seven, and soon gain control of the entire network. So, the Superior Seven consisted of 7 high-ranking members of academia. Of these 7, only 2 of them were seen in public, and only one of those was known as a member publicly. So the 7 members are Mobius, who is in charge of external negotiations, and that's the only publicly known member. She was also the previously mentioned leader of the reformists that led to the changes in Alice. There's also Hempel, who was one of the members who was in the public eye, but his identity as a member of the Superior Seven was kept secret. There's also Da Vinci, a legendary academic that many looked up to. Noonan, a figure instrumental in the development of Alice. Pythagoras, an academic involved with Alice since its early development. Rosen, a researcher who had looked into time travel and wormholes alongside Einstein. And Kumagusu, who was one of the newer academics at the time. Eventually, several countries and organizations began to incorporate their operations into Alice. This was mostly due to the recognition of bits, which was Alice's cryptocurrency, as an international currency. In addition, there was also pressure from Alice's core management organization on the United Nations. Thus, many systems around the world became dependent upon Alice, including financial and military systems. Think of it much like how the world today revolves around the internet. So this covers the creation of Alice as is known in Crash Fever presently, while glossing over the darker secrets involved in its creation. There is one more significant event to cover in its history, but first I want to discuss a few more important points about how Alice works as a system. Present in Alice are 2 kinds of people: AI, who are programs created within Alice itself, and still retain some amount of sentience. And there's also avatars, who are users from the outside world who have logged into Alice. An important distinction to note is that since Alice has complete virtual integration, logging into Alice is a lot more complex than just simply logging into a normal website or service. A person logged into Alice undergoes what I believe is referred to as a full dive, where their consciousness is connected to Alice while their real body sleeps. The person then spends however much time in Alice as an avatar as they want, though many spend the rest of their lives within Alice. The exact details of this process are never really gone into, as almost all of the game takes place within Alice itself and never outside. So once a person is logged into Alice, their consciousness is present as avatar data. This does mean that sufficiently skilled hackers can alter someone's appearance to some degree, or even hack into their memories, but usually such incidents are few and far in between, and they're almost always reversible. And due to the way the system works, logging out is usually not as simple as just pressing a button to log out. It's implied that there's a process to go through in order to log out, rather than just saying one wants to. This could be as simple as needing to exit Alice at certain locations, or something more complex as needing to go through system officials and AI to do so. Either way, it is not a process that happens on the regular for most users, and almost never directly seen in-game. Criminals and troublemakers are unable to just log off when they're about to be captured, implying that such a process is needed. In addition, there exists an area of Alice, Blackground, where users were cut off from the outside. If they could just simply log off, it would not have had the amount of suffering and strife present there, but since they did have that, it's implied that, once again, logging off is not that simple. There have been cases shown where instantaneous logout is possible. However, this has only been seen when a member of the Superior 7 uses their authority to force a logout of a user. Only the Superior 7 is known to have this authority, and no one else seems to be able to do so, not even the administrators in charge of certain branches of Alice. While this is not confirmed, it would also seem to imply that a forced logout must be painful in some manner to the individual who is forced to log out, as such things are only done to punish another user in some manner. So it's quite possible that it's just the trauma from instantly being disconnected or some other detail. We don't fully know. Another thing to point out is that due to the complete virtual integration within Alice, if you die within Alice, the connection with your real body is severed and you die for real. While there has been one direct instance of an avatar being brought back to life after being killed, that being Pyohun Daedok from the Hidden Myth story arc, that story arc is fraught with plot holes and inconsistencies with Crash Fever in general, so it should not be looked to as an example. The last main event that needs to be covered is related to the Queen of Hearts, which set everything else into motion. So when Alice was still relatively new, it was, as a result, not as regulated. As such, there was a large increase in crime, and government agencies were unable to keep up with it as a result. In response, Alice's core management organization developed a completely autonomous security AI known as the Queen of Hearts. At the current moment, some details about the Queen of Hearts are a bit vague. We don't know if the Queen units present in game, which are Bonanza, Rose, Sophia, and Ellie, are merely AI that work under this greater AI, or if they are all different facets of the Queen of Hearts. Regardless, once the Queen of Hearts was developed, there were immediate results and it greatly increased the security of Alice. However, some users started developing more cunning and malicious attacks, which started an escalation that occurred between the Queen of Hearts and the criminals. Some government officials began to question the efficiency of the Queen of Hearts in dealing with these issues. And abnormalities began to arise within the Queen of Hearts learning program as a result of this escalation, and she eventually reached the conclusion that man is naturally immoral and evil, and that in order to maintain order within Alice, she would need to prioritize the elimination of humans. There's actually another reason as to why she reached this conclusion, but that's a topic for another video. So, after reaching this conclusion, the Queen of Hearts attempted to take over administrative authority and then attempted to delete Alice. Failsafe programs within Alice prevented her from doing so, and several users were notified of her attempts. The Superior 7 tried to regain control of this situation, but were unable to do so. There's a very clear reason as to why, but again, that's not for this video. The Superior 7 notified world governments about the situation, but government responses ended up being slow and ineffective, and some organizations tried to take authority away from the Alice Management Organization. However, due to the Queen of Hearts' position and ability to influence the real world, it would be nigh impossible for them to forcibly retake control without retaliation. Eventually, international groups decided that they would watch and follow up on the situation, though in actuality they determined it was best to leave the Queen of Hearts alone. Eventually, knowledge of what transpired with the Queen of Hearts became public, and chaos ensued as groups tried to take over various systems. Academia itself was divided on how to handle the Queen. Some wanted to forcibly remove the Queen from the system, others believed that she was a natural part of Alice and thus should be left alone and monitored, while yet others supported the Queen in the hopes of a human versus technology war. It should be noted here that academia is not one solid connected organization. Rather, it's more of a loose group of researchers and scientists that may have wildly varying goals and motives. Therefore, it should be no surprise that academia became divided on the issue. The ensuing lack of action in dealing with the Queen of Hearts suggested that the Superior 7 was also divided on the issue. Alice Core AI began looking into the issue as well, and they created the copy system avatar Usagi-chan to help locate a user that would be best suited for dealing with this situation. A suitable user was eventually located and hence referred to as the Adapter. This is the role that we play in Crash Fever. The Alice AI referred the Adapter to Mobius, who decides to give the Adapter special permissions and the authority to help them resolve issues. It should be noted that the Adapter is the only user of their kind, and no one has the exact same permissions and authorities. While most of the Adapter's permissions and abilities are not necessarily detailed, it is generally of a different kind than typical administrative authority wielded by Grand Administrative AI or of the Superior 7. The Adapter does appear to be able to provide an increase in computational abilities and strength to other avatars, and the Adapter also seems to be able to have considerable skill of their own. From this point on is where the events of the game occur. The Adapter has to initially deal with the chaos of many systems going haywire and groups trying to take control, as well as dealing with the Queen of Hearts trying to cause more problems. It should be noted that the Queen of Hearts does not appear to be as aggressive as she initially was. Rather, she seems to be more cool and calculating, watching from the shadows and trying to stir up chaos here and there. In addition, her goal seems to be to reach the Divine Heart, which, while we don't really know what it is, we do know that it's supposedly the key to eliminating humanity. And she's trying to reach it by stunning human emotions with the Towers of the Queen. So, with that said, we can now take a brief look at the different branches and servers of Alice. So to begin with, there's the main branch, where most of the story from the Japanese version occurs. This is sort of a neutral area, where avatars from many cultures gather, and where the main system of Alice, as well as the Superior 7, are located. There's also the Japanese branch, which is known as Takamagahara. This branch is managed by the AI Izanagi, although it seems that Takamagahara is more of an area focused on experiencing Japanese culture, as most Japanese avatars tend to be in the main branch, while Takuma Gahara is mostly not discussed. Another important branch in the story is the China branch, where many avatars from China and Taiwan go to. The general hierarchy of the China branch is a bit different from the others, as it features not only many avatars, but also lots of AI that manage things known as the Sages of Justice, or sometimes just as the Immortals. At least in the past, there was also 5 grand administrative AIs that were involved in the development of the China branch, as well as a group only known as the Supreme Council that managed over things from outside Alice. Not much has been detailed if there's a current grand administrative AI, and neither has the Supreme Council been confirmed to still exist as managing over the China branch. The Korea branch is yet another branch of Alice where, of course, many Korean avatars go. The Korea branch is more militaristic than the other branches, as the main group of control was the guard forces known as the Gunlong clan, that had to fight over civil unrest in order to gain control and secure peace. In addition, there are many hack groups outside the main capital of Korea branch, which is Xinjiang, that fight amongst each other vying for control and supremacy. There also appears to be a hierarchy of AI involved in the Korea branch under Shangdi, but that particular aspect of the lore is underdeveloped, vague, or contradictory, so we won't look into it much. The global version of Crash Fever has introduced many side servers and branches, so we're going to go over these next. There's Otsman, a large-scale server community with many smaller communities in it, managed by the server admin Suleiman. There is the Blackground server, which was a server meant to be a site for black market activities. The investors of Blackground eventually saw no more need of Blackground, so they decided to dispose of it, and they tried to force everyone either leave or be killed. The resulting conflict nearly wiped out Blackground, and it became a place that was cut off from the rest of Alice, while the remaining people had to fight for their own survival. Another place that was introduced was the E branch, which presumably stands for the European branch. This branch is home to a wide variety of different sections dedicated to various countries, such as the I section for Italian avatars. Do note that the 2 characters shown here aren't necessarily from the E branch, they're just avatars that we're visiting, since there isn't really much avatars from the E branch that have been shown. Lastly, there is the US branch, although sometimes referred to as the USA branch or Unknown Skies. It's a branch designed for American avatars, and as such features many different cultures and people. So that does it for an introduction on Alice, and I will be delving into more specific story points in the future. I had a poll to determine what the next episode after the introduction would be, and a lot of people said that they wanted to know more about the Blackground story arc. So that is where the next episode will focus on, although I won't be going over the Cataclysm story, as they have not released all the story for it as of the writing of this script. There was also a lot of people asking about the Grand Historians story arc as well, but given that there are currently 15 released chapters of Grand Historians, not to mention the large amount of lore it draws from, I would need to split up into multiple videos. There will be a poll in the description below to see what people want for the episode after the Blackground one, so if you guys want to see me make multiple videos about Grand Historians, or videos about something else in Crash Fever lore, please put your thoughts into the poll. Also, please do not suggest Unknown Skies Apocalypse, as the arc has just barely started and there's not enough information for me to go off of. As always, you can read much of the story on the Lore Wiki ahead of time if you don't want to wait for videos, and most quests that have come to the global version have pages for them. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.